أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي كان موجودا قبل حدوث الأشياء ويبقى بعد فناء الأشياء تفرد بالأولية والقدم ووسم كل شيء ما أداه بالفناء والعدم كما قال عز شأن كل شيء هالك إلا وجهه وكل نفس ذائقة الموت وقال كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام سبحان من لا يخفى عليه اختلاف النيات ولا يعزم عنه معاصي العباد في الخلوات سبحان الله الذي منه خلقة العباد وإليه المعاد فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يره ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يره نشهد أن لا إله إلا هو الملك الذي لا ينازع في ملكه ولا يضاد في حكمه يعذب من يشاء بما يشاء كيف يشاء ويرحم من يشاء بما يشاء كيف يشاء تعذيبه المسيئين عدل وعفوه تفضل ونشهد أن محمدا سيد المرسلين وخير المبشرين والمنذرين صلى الله عليه وآله الهداة المهديين من ركب سفينته نجا واهتدى ومن تخلف عنها ضل فغرق وهوى أوصيكم عباد الله بالاعتصام بالتقوى فإنه حبل متين وقربة فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقول الحق وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل يا أهل الكتاب تعالوا إلى كلمة سواء بيننا وبينكم ألا نعبد إلا الله ولا نشرك به شيئا ولا يتخذ بعضنا بعضا أربابا من دون الله فإن تولوا فقولوا اشهدوا بأننا مسلمون صدق الله العلي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I begin by advising myself and all of you to adopt the taqwa of Allah as is the best of provisions. The verse that I recited is a famous ayat from Surah Al Imran, ayat number 64, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the Ahl al-Kitab by saying, O people of the book, O Prophet, tell these people of the book, say, come to a common word between us and you, that we will worship no one but Allah. They will not ascribe any partner to him, and that some of us will not take some others as lords besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if they turn away, say, be witness that we have submitted to Allah. This ayat and many such ayat in Quran which talk about the common grounds between the people of the book and Muslimin. Of course, there was a time when they coexisted and lived side by side from the very beginning of Islam. Many of these were treated in an equal manner, as I will highlight some of those things in front of you today. But the reason that I chose, one, because of certain commonalities that exist between these faiths, as it's very important and relevant, as upon us tomorrow is the biggest holiday in the Christian community all across the world. 25th of December is the birth of Hazrat Isa alayhi according to the Christian faith. Quran mentions the name of Hazrat Isa 25 times. I don't know if there's a coincidence, but regardless, Quran mentions the name of Hazrat Isa 25 times. And on 11 occasions, he uses the word Masih. Isa comes from Yasur, which means the savior, Nijat Dahande, the one who is going to provide this Nijat or the savior. So Masih is Christ. One of the common beliefs between the two religions that we find is the concept of taking care of your neighbor. And I think the reason I chose this discussion for today's khutbah, as expected, more and more people will be coming in due to it being holiday, kids are off from school. If you can just lower the volume a little bit, there's a little echo in it. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And because the people will be coming in and the kids will be coming, it is important that we understand one of the common grounds between our neighbors. Those primarily are non-Muslims, and primarily they are either Christians or followers of another faith. So with that said, one of the quotations from the kalam of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam al-Muttaqeen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam says, وَلَا يُضَارُّ بِالْجَارِّ وَلَا يَشْمَتُ بِالْمَصَائِبِ. He does not cause harm to his neighbor. He does not feel happy at others' misfortunes. You take this kalam of Amir al-Mu'mineen and you elaborate. Look at the depth of this one sentence. In Arabic, it's merely 4 words. It says, وَلَا يُضَارُ بِالْجَارِ. That's 2. وَلَا يَشْمَتْ بِالْمَصَائِبِ. That's 4. 4 words in all, yet the meaning of the depth of the meaning behind it. That Imam says, he does not cause harm to his neighbor. He does not feel happy at others' misfortunes. Minimum right anyone has on another human being is not to harm them. That's the bare minimum that is expected from you as a human, especially a neighbor must feel protected from the hands of those who live around that individual. Imagine you have a fear of your neighbors, that what kind of individual they are, what kind of business they're indulging into. You will not be able to sleep at night, with ease, with feeling the protection of your children when you are at work or they're at home. It will always constantly bother you. About Sila Rahim and relations with people, we discussed a hadith in which Prophet of Islam, Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, and he divided neighbors into 3 different categories. The first group is your relative. He or she has 3 rights on you, as the right of a neighbor, the right of Islam, and right of Sila Rahmi, blood relations. 3 subcategories. Second group was not related to you, just your neighbor and a fellow Muslim. These are the 2 rights upon him. And third group of unbelievers who have 1 right on you, and that right is the right of being the neighbor. So you can understand the one who's your relative and your neighbor and a Muslim, these are the 3 rights that I have upon them. But one who is your Muslim and your neighbor and not a relative, they have 2 rights. And the one who is not Muslim, neither your relative, 1 right is of them being your neighbor. Prophet stipulated rights for any unbelieving neighbor as well. He mentioned that ahsin mujawarata man jawaraka takun mu'mina. That be kind towards your neighbors. And look at the kalam of Rasulullah that does not distinguish whether this neighbor is your relative, whether this neighbor is Muslim, whatever the case may be. He says, ahsin mujawarata man jawaraka takun mu'minan. Be kind towards your religion, your neighbors, fulfill the rights of your neighbor, only then you are considered to be a believer. So one of the conditions of mu'min mentioned in the kalam of Rasulullah is not talking about the faith and the ethnicity of this individual who lives next door to you. Rather, he says, Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir fala yu'dhi jarahu. One who believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and believes in the hereafter is someone who does not harm those who are considered to be the neighbors of this individual. And I guess you can look at it from the aspect how Quran emphasizes on this aspect as well. A lot of times we say, well, these are traditions, and the traditions and the ahadith could be disputed, whether there are sahih or muwassaq or mursal, da'if, mawdu, all of these different categories of hadith that we have. You can go ahead and raise questions whether, Maulana, what is the source of this hadith that you recited? Maybe. Of course, there's a concept of looking at the diraya and the rajal of the hadith, but majority in the musa'imiha that is mentioned as far as the hadith is concerned, it is mentioned that if it's something which is making sense to your intellect and it is exhorting towards something which is, a positive trait, don't even have to look at the source of this hadith. But nonetheless, if anyone raises that question, I tell you to refer to ayat number 36 of Surah Nisa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا. Now there's no stipulation as far as the authenticity of this ayat is concerned. It's in Surah Nisa, verse number 36. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَبِذِي الْقُرْبَى. وَالْيَتَامَ وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَالْجَارِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْجَارِ الْجُنُبِ وَالصَّاحِبِ بِالْجَنْبِ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ. This ayat and many such ayat in Quran explicitly mention that worship Allah, do not ascribe any partners to Him, and be good to parents, the relatives, the orphans, the needy. Up until this point, it's common. Then it says the near neighbor, which means your relative, the distant neighbor, which means not your relative or not even the followers of the same religion, and the companion at your side, the one who's at your side and is your companion. Rasulullah takes the wisdom from these ayat of Quran and elaborates it as the previous ahadith that I mentioned. So after the invitation to ibadat and tawheed in this ayat 36 of Surah Nisa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invites people to worship Him and not to associate any partners with Him. What does He mention? He commands us to be kind towards our neighbors. Remember that ayat of Surah Bani Israel, which is normally recited in Isara Sawab Majalis, that وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. It is the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not worship anyone except Allah and to be kind to your parents. We always draw this parallel that being kind to parents and worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how it is mentioned close to each other, just raise the emphasis on the aspect of being kind to the parents. Because everybody understands the importance of worshiping Allah and the concept of Tawheed. Similarly over here, after mentioning wa'abud rabbak, that is worship your Lord and do not associate any part, be kind to your neighbors. Just look at it. If you can draw a parallel over there, you can draw a parallel over here as well. So after invitation to ibadat and Tawheed, Allah commands us what? Kind toward our neighbors, near or distant. Whether they're close to you, meaning in a sense, they're related to you, blood relatives, or distant, maybe they're not related to you. Based on some traditions, near neighbors are those who are close to you in your religion as well. So not only further category of being blood relatives, but also your brothers in Islam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So regardless of what the case may be, and however you describe the tafsir of this ayah, whether close and distant means, regardless of all of that, one thing is clear from this is that neighbor is the recipient of your kindness as the hukm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way He's commanding you to worship Him and you do not turn away from worshiping Him. He's commanding you to not associate partners with Him. You don't turn away from associating partners with Allah. Similarly, on the same breath, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is announcing what? Be kind to your neighbors. This kindness towards the neighbors, regardless of their status, is considered to be an obligation mentioned over here. And then according to some traditions, of course, we have to realize, use ahadith to further explain these ayat, mentions that 40 houses in all 4 directions are considered to be your neighbors. 40 houses, not just the immediate neighbor or the one after or the down the street. 40 houses in 4 directions is considered to be your neighbor. The right of neighbor is emphasized so much in Islam and the kalam of Ma'sumin alayhim salatu wassalam. The Prophet said, "Ma zala Jibra'il yusini bil jari hatta dhanantu annahu sayuwarrithu." That Jibra'il continuously advised me about the neighbors, and I thought, to the extent that he advised me, I thought he will go ahead and put a portion in my inheritance toward my neighbors. That means my neighbors will be inheriting from. Of course, that is not the case. Neighbors don't inherit from you unless you go ahead and stipulate that in your 1/3, which you have the right to do so. That 1/3 that is your right, you can go ahead and give it to anyone. But the 2/3 is already been stipulated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala according to the ayat of Quran. They said, but there's no wajib giving to the neighbor as far as your virasat is concerned. Rasulullah said he emphasized so much and he mentioned so many merits of it that I thought he will go ahead and put a portion as far as my virasat is concerned. Amir al-Mu'mineen, also at the time of his shahadat, when he was struck by the sword of Ibn Muljim, Imam uttered these words when he was giving advice to his family members. One of the words of the advice of Amir al-Mu'mineen were this: Wallah, wallah fi jiranikum fa innahum wasiyatu nabiyyikum ma zala yusi bihim hatta dhananna annahu sayuwarrithuhum. Beware of your neighbors. Beware of your neighbors. They are the will of your prophet. He had always advised, cautioned, and reminded us of the responsibility towards them, so much so that we often thought that Prophet might on the next occasion assign them a share from our heritage, from our wirasat. But of course, that was not the case. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So quickly, in this second portion, I want to go through some of the responsibilities one has towards the neighbors. Prophet said, honor and the respect of a neighbor is like the honor and the respect of your mother. Look at the comparison. He says, Hurmatul jar alal jar ka hurmati ummihi. The respect and the honor of a neighbor is similar to the respect and the honor of one's mother. Now, I don't need to further elaborate on how we look at the honor and the respect of our mothers. Person asked the Prophet where I should purchase a house. In Jahina, in Mazina, in Thaqif, in Quraysh. Rasulullah responded, Iltamisul jar qabla shira'id dar wal rafiq qabla tariq. These then became famous anecdotes. Afterwards, these were out of the hadith and they became famous anecdotes. It says what? Ask about the neighbor before buying a house. When you're buying a house, when you're looking to relocate, ask about the neighbors before you buy a house. And then he said neighbors before family, friends, rafiq, safar. But a lot of time we find that this tradition, while it explains the fact that one should look at the neighborhood before buying a house, and it's very clear why we should be paying attention towards the neighborhood. As I mentioned in the beginning, you want to make sure that the neighborhood is safe, sound, free of drugs, anything of that sort. Good neighborhood, schools are good. All these things are taken under consideration when one is buying the house. Therefore, some of the features that we look at in the house, it's not how fancy the house is, what features it may have. Rather, if the neighborhood is not safe and sound, then these features are not really worth it. So, no, Maulana, we're getting a very good deal on this huge house, which fulfills all our needs, but it's not in a very good neighborhood. I don't need to tell you. I'm sure your aql will be able to give hukum in this area. So no, all we need is just istikhara. All we need is just istikhara at this moment. And therefore, we will move forward with this. While they know that the neighborhood is not good and potentially there might be danger toward themselves and their children, but they're willing to take by going out of istikhara. Istikhara will not be any beneficial at this moment. Istikhara is usually taken when you have two equal opportunities and you're unable to decide. Your aql is not properly functioning and you're unable to make a firm decision. So you go ahead and use and resort to istikhara at that moment. But of course, you should always do your homework and look at the interaction should be positive for the family and those in your neighborhood. Number 3, people ask for istikhara when they're purchasing the house. I always mention this to them as well, that do your homework before you come to this final resort. Why? Istikhara comes out positive, 50 chance, right? If I take out the istikhara, there's a 50-50 chance. It may come out to be good, bad. But a lot of time, what we've seen that people have already made up their mind on something, just for a push from the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. If the istikhara comes good, then it's a done deal. Regardless of the fact, whatever is to be expected of this purchase that they're about to make. So be very, very careful when it comes to especially dealing with istikhara. It says, Ma amana bi man bata shaba'an wa jaruhu ja'i. So number 1, Prophet said the honor and the respect of the neighbor is like the respect of your mother. Number 2, when asked neighborhood, Rasulullah said, don't is big or that neighborhood, look at for the people that will live in that neighborhood. And similarly, when you are looking for a house, and I'm sure a lot of young couples who are now getting into the stage of their life where they're looking to settle down at a place and looking to buy a house and make this purchase, eventually that big purchase in their lives, I would urge that you go through these checklists. Number 1, make sure that the schools are good. We always have that as the first priority. We always look for the neighborhood, which is good. We always also should look for that if our relatives are nearby, for example, if you don't live with your parents are in the same neighborhood so that they're close to you so you can easily visit them on regular basis. And also, if it's not on top of your priority list, at least it should be there somewhere that is a masjid nearby. There's an Imam Baria close by, where on any occasion, wherever there's a program, you should not have hesitancy of getting up and going to it because it's too far away from where you live. All these should be part of your checklist before you endeavor on buying this house. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bad neighbor. Luqman the wise, he said, I have carried a heavy boulder and steel on my back, but nothing is heavier than a bad neighbor. In Arabic, the word tahmil means abiding or tolerating. Prophet added 4 things that break the back of a person. One of them is a bad neighbor. He also said the person doesn't belong to us, whose neighbor doesn't feel safe from the evil of this individual. In fact, an Ansar had come to the Holy Prophet and complained that he bought a house and is worried that about this bad neighbor of his. Prophet told Amir al-Mu'mineen, Salman al-Farisi, Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, to the masjid and announced out loud, Laysa minna man lam ya'man ja'ruhu biwaqihi. He said that person is not from us, from whose hand the neighbor is feeling distress and is being caused to suffer. If there's the smallest amount of distress given to your neighbor and there's a calling, that person does not belong to this realm of Islam. Fourth Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salatu wasalam, went to the extent that in his book Rasalatul Huquq, the rights on the treatise on rights, one of the recipient of these rights, Imam chooses it to be your neighbor. It's not a lengthy discussion. It's not a lengthy, writing from our fourth Imam. Yes, of course, there have been many translations and then further commentaries done on this Risalat al-Huquq, because all Imam mentions is one paragraph regarding the neighbor, which could be summarized as be a guardian for him when he's absent. You should not pursue any of his imperfections. You should guard them in such a way that none of his defects are discovered. And you should not eavesdrop on him, and you should not forsake him during times of hardship, and you should not envy him when he receives a blessing, and do not lose temper with him and behave out of ignorance with him, and many other things that Imam mentions in this one brief paragraph of this. When we Imam is taking a point out of these 50 rights that Imam mentions in this book. And not all of them are regarding individual, because some of them are regarding your body parts, your nafs, your heart, your body parts such as your ears, your eyes, your qalb, your hands, individuals of the society. One of those individuals that Imam chooses this right, that itself, Imam says in the right is another thing. But the fact that he chose this to be one of the individuals for whom the rights must be mentioned shows us and highlights the importance. So therefore, this is the message going away, especially the children who are present here, that how it is an Islamic duty of ours when it comes to with our neighbors, regardless of their faith, religious background. Yes, you want to make sure that their faith and their cultural background does not impose upon you that you start losing your own cultural values and you start losing your religious values. No, you should always be the trend setter, and you should not be the one who is recipient of the trend. No, youngsters would understand a lot about trending and all these things because of the social media. You should always be the trend setter, and you should not be on the receiving end of it, especially when in the receiving end, it is something which is problematic and questionable from the eyes of Islam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give us the tawfiq and ability to follow these commands of Ma'asumin alayhim salatu wassalam, and look into and ponder over these ayat of Quran so that we can better deal with our neighbors. In the Asl Hadith, وَأَبْلَغَ الْمُوعِدَ كِتَابُ اللَّهِ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ بِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحليم الكريم غافر الذنب وقابل التوب وهو الغفور الرحيم سبحان من سبقت رحمته غضبه وبسط اليدين بالرحمة سبحان من لم يكلف نفسا إلا دون وسعها وعفى عن السيئات ولم يجاز بها سبحان من لا يزداد على معاصي العباد إلا كرما وجودا وعلى كثرة الذنوب إلا عفوا وصفحا نشهد أن لا إله إلا هو العطوف على العباد بجوده والعباد والمذنبين بحلمه ونشهد أن محمدا نبيه وحبيبه سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين بعثه رحمة للعالمين ألا قد أمركم الله في محكم كتابه بالصلاة على نبيه وحبيبه فقال تعليما لكم وتشريفا للصفي إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. Before I finish off the second khutbah, very quickly reminder that as you've been following the news, the rise in the COVID cases in the recent past, especially here in the state of New Jersey, it is again an alarming sign for us, and we're make sure that we fulfill our duty and obligation when we are in public gatherings such as this right here in Namaz Jum'ah or Shabbat Jummah program or any Jashan or Majlis al-Aza, and especially when we have the program, which is also a special program taking place here in this masjid, the annual fundraising dinner where many of you, inshallah, will be attending. Make sure that while you may have purchased a ticket and you do have plans of coming, there's an option to also attend this program online where you can contribute towards the cause, and also make sure that while you're attending and you're free of all of the COVID-like symptoms, you have already been vaccinated, and also make sure that you keep your masks on as you all have right now at the moment at all times over your nose and your mouth, and refrain from shaking hands or hugging or anything of that sort which brings and cancel this social distancing. So keep the social distancing intact and all of the other precautions that you all, mashallah, have been doing for the past now over 2 years. We have adapted very well and learned slowly and gradually how to deal with this virus. And as there have been many waves of it coming and going, we need to take these precautions very, very seriously. Doctors will tell you the situation that is in the hospitals. Make sure that we do not take it for granted and make sure that we fulfill our obligations. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. اللهم صل على سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وعلى إمام المسلمين وقائد الغر المحجلين أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب صلوات الله وسلامه عليه ولا سيدة نساء العالمين وبذة خاتم النبيين سيدتنا فاطمة بنت رسول الله صلوات الله عليها وعلى الحسن المجتبى والحسين الشهيد بكربلاء وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي عليهم الصلاة والسلام. اللهم صل على مولانا صاحب الزمان ما هي آثار البدع والطغيان هادم أبنية الشرك والنفاق حاسد فروع البغي والشقاق صلوات الله وسلامه عليه ولا آبائه الكرام اتصلت الليالي والأيام. اللهم عجل فرجا وسهل مخرجا واكحل ناظرنا بنظرة منا إليه واجعلنا من المستشهدين بين يديه وتفضل على أمراء المؤمنين بمزيد التوفيقات وازدياد الإقبال وعلو الدرجات. اللهم افعل بنا ما أنت أهله ولا تفعل بنا ما نحن أهله بجاه محمد وآله المعصومين صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين. ونحن ممن يذكر فتنفع ذكر أن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
Please silence your phone. Thank you.
الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم. ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم. مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا. بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين. قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون. وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما. قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. وربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار بجاه محمد وآله الأطهار. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العالى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العالى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته يقوم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد رب صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع الله لمن حمد الله أكبر ربنا أفرغ علينا الصبر وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين بجاه محمد وآله الطاهرين الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده رب صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضيف الله أكبر الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد
اللهم صل على محمد تسبيح فاطمة الزهراء لا إله إلا الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه وتقرأ بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم كل وليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ورحمة الله وبركاته. The sponsors for today's Jummah lunch, Sayyid Murtaza Nadeen Naqvi and Sayyid Ibrahim Naqvi. This is relative as well as yours, especially Sayyid Hassan Nadeen Naqvi, Ibn Sayyid Awlad Ali Naqvi, Mr. and Mrs. Hassan Askari, Mr. and Mrs. Ahmad Ali, Mr. and Mrs. Liaqat Hussain, Mr. and Mrs. Tahir Abbas, Mrs. Hasniya Kirmani. Surah Fatiha. Yeah. A lot of people had asked this question regarding the namaz al-Dhuhr. We give time in between Jummah and Asr so people can help. But as far as the followers of Masjid Sistani are concerned, his istiftah mentions that if from the time of Zawal and the finish of the khutbah is no longer than 40 minutes, that means within 45 minutes, you have the khutbahs and you have the namaz. For example, today the time was 11:58. And if namaz with the khutbahs finished by 12:43, which is the 45 minutes period, then you don't have to offer namaz al-Dhuhr. It's saqat upon you. But for example, the khutbah runs a little bit longer. It becomes an hour-long khutbah, which rarely happens over here. But in case you were attending and the khutbah was longer and namaz ended up being beyond 45 minutes, the khutbah, let's say 75 minutes, then ihtiyat is to also offer namaz al-Dhuhr before you can go ahead and offer namaz al-Asr. The masala is concerned, but we were well within the 45 minutes. Those were the Muqalladeen of the Sistani. You don't have to offer namaz al-Dhuhr. Inshallah, tonight we have the fundraising dinner coming up, and it's at 6 p.m. Those who have bought the tickets, online or whether in person, you're
inshallah, welcome to join us at 6 p.m. tonight for a family fun-filled event. Inshallah, with safety and with all the things that are happening, we will make sure that the environment is safe for all of you who are attending. Babysitting services, inshallah, will be provided for children ages 11 and under, so you can bring your kids. Of course, there's no charge for them. You can bring them, and they will be entertained and taken care of for the duration of the event until the dinner is served. So the program includes, speeches and messages, rather short messages from 4 of the renowned scholars from around the world, which is one of them Al-Hadi Hussain Badri, Dr. Amar Ashwani, Sheikh Muhammad Al-Hilli, and Sheikh Jihad Ismail. They will be giving their brief messages. I will be conducting, inshallah, the event. We will have manqaba recited by the lesson and other things, inshallah, such as raffle and auctioning of some of the tabarrukat from the Haram of Imam Hussein and Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam. So you're welcome to take part in that as well. The program will start at 6 p.m. sharp, and we hope to finish it within the time frame that we have and achieve the goal. And the purpose behind it is that we've seen the building in the backside, which is almost ready and is ready to roll for next year, inshallah. Along with your financial support, what we're looking for is that now your children and your grandchildren, for that matter, you should look to enroll them into static school, permanent school, full-time school. For the sake of course, the discussion was regarding neighbors and the environment, to provide a safe, secure environment for your kids when they are being given this education. So that is the purpose behind it. Hopefully you will come with your deep pockets, with your checks, inshallah, and with cash and everything, so you can take part fully in this opportunity that is presented to you to go ahead and be part of the historic event. Sallallahu Muhammad wa alihi what I said earlier in the khutbah, make sure that you practice social distancing, keep your mask on at all times, ensure that you're vaccinated coming. Also, we've not, we assume that you've already vaccinated, gotten your booster as well, and you've gone past that argument, and all the other things that are required, refraining from handshaking and hugging, all those things. And we have minimized how many people will be sitting on each table, just to keep that also from our perspective. Inshallah, looking forward to welcoming all of you tonight at 6 p.m. Let's recite this dua sahat for all of those people who have requested for dua, those who are suffering, struggling, going through difficult time, physically, financially, spiritually, mentally. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give that full and healthy recovery, inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء 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 يدعوكم خلفاء اللهم الله قليلا ما تذكرون. It's empty over here, I see, and all the way over there as well. So those who are sitting in the back, maybe they can come in forward and fill in the gaps. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله صلاة الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته يقوم ويقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته يقوم ويقعد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد.
تسبيح فاتحة الدعاء سلام الله عليك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام. وأسأله أن يتوب علي توبة عبد ذليل قاضٍ فقير باعث مسكين مستقيم مستجير لا يملك لنفسه نفعا ولا ضرا ولا موتا ولا حياة ولا نشورا. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من نفس لا تشبع ومن قلب لا يخشى ومن علم لا ينفع ومن صلاة لا ترفع ومن دعاء لا يسمع. اللهم إني أسألك اليسر بعد العسر والفرج بعد الكرب والرخاء بعد الشدة. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
وجد زيارة لسائر زيارة وخبر الإمام. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا نبي الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين يا قسيم الجنة والنار. السلام عليك يا سيدي العالمين. السلام عليك يا أهل البيت والمؤمنين. السلام عليك يا زين العابدين يا زين المتهجدين يا إمام المسلمين يا ولي المسلمين. السلام عليك يا قرة الناظرين العارفين. السلام عليك يا وسيء الوسيين يا خازن الوصايا المرسلين يا ضوء المستوحشين يا نور المتهجدين يا صراط المرتزين يا ذخيرة المتعبدين. السلام عليك يا مصباح العالمين يا سفينة العلم يا سكينة الحلم. السلام عليك يا ميزان القصاص. السلام عليك يا سمينة الخلاص. السلام عليك يا بحر الهدى يا بدر الجدى يا أيها الأواه الحليم. السلام عليك أيها الصابر الحكيم. السلام عليك يا رئيس البكائين يا بسم المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا أبو محمد. أشهد أنك حجة الله وابن حجته وأبو حجته وابن أمينه ومن أمنائه وأنك ناصاده في عبادته ربك وسارات في مرضاته وخيرت أعداءه وسررت أولياءه. أشهد أنك قد عبدت الله حق عبادته وتقيته حق تقاته وأطعته حق طاعته حتى ذاق اليقين. وعليك يا مولاي يا ابن رسول الله أفضل التحية والسلام عليك ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان يا خليفة الرحمن يا إمام الإنس والجان وكافة الإيمان يا تفسير القرآن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا إمام إدماننا أجل الله فرجه وصحب الله فرجه وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الفاتحة. كبير الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد نعرہ رسالت یا رسول اللہ نعرہ حیدری یا